Thanks so much for joining us on Morning Live Sport. Now, Kagiso Rabada took 5 wickets as South Africa seized the early initiative in the World Test Championship final, and that's before Australia fought back. Now, Rabada overtook Allan Donald to become our country's 4th highest Test wicket taker by claiming 5 for 51 as Australia were bowled out for 202, and that was on the opening day at Lord's. Then Australia hit back to reduce the Proteas to 43 for 4. That was in their reply before the close. So to talk to us about this, we've roped in cricket analyst Khanyiso Tshwaku. You know, he's a familiar face on our screens, and we also have Ayavuya Myoli. I'm going to start with Khanyiso just for now, just to give us some context, especially for perhaps non-cricket lovers, those really not clued up on the game. Khanyiso, give us some context as to why this is different as a Test Championship and the history of the tournament briefly.
Good morning, guys, and good morning to the viewers. Look, I mean, the World Test Championship was introduced in 2019 as a competition that will give Test cricket context, because one of the bigger challenges with Test cricket at the time is that you'd find that a lot of the bigger teams, namely Australia, India, and England, would play Test series against each other, which are marquee series, namely the Ashes, namely the Nawab Patawudi, Anthony de Mello Trophy, and the Border Gavaskar Trophy, and to a small extent, the Frank Worrell Trophy between Australia and the West Indies. But every other country did not have a series that actually contributed to the context of Test cricket. So the introduction of the World Test Championship actually elevated the importance of Test cricket. Because then what then happened, every Test match mattered. Because from 2019 onwards, what has happened in Test cricket in particular is that there's been a narrowing of draws. And with the narrowing of draws, it's because that every match matters. I mean, if you look at South Africa's part of the final in particular, they won 8 out of 12 Test matches. And if you look at how South Africa as a country in particular, draws have been in short supply. It's not because of just result wickets per se, but because every game matters, teams are looking to make sure that they get to that winning percentage. Because remember, you may win your Test matches, but what actually gets you into the final is the amount of matches you win vis-a-vis the amount of matches you play. Hence why England, for example, have been complaining regarding the fact that they played 22 Test matches in the cycle compared to South Africa's 12. However, they only won 11 of their Tests, which contributed to the low win percentage as compared to the fact that South Africa actually won 8 of their Tests, and that's why they're in the final.
You know, this just reminds me about why perhaps Test cricket is not the popular format of the game. You know, people that are not entrenched in it from a historical perspective say, oh my gosh, it gets complicated, it's long, I don't necessarily understand it. And Khanyiso just gave us some nice context there. So let's move on to the final and what's currently happening. Day 1 was exciting. Of course, Kagiso Rabada was in fine form, and he just comes back from some personal struggles as well, off the field as well. Just your thoughts on day 1 there.
Yeah, man, I'll say day 1 was a bowler's day. I think how Kagiso and Jansen came in and just stole the show. Like even the wickets was a bit on the slow side, and then just favoring the bowlers a bit. There was a bit of movement, and the more you push it fuller into the length, and the guys took advantage of it. I think they were very consistent with their length, and they were disciplined with their areas.
And then let's look at Australia, because there was history made on both sides, right? Kagiso Rabada moved from 327, I think it was, to 332 Test wickets, and then he overtook Allan Donald's record there. But Mitchell Starc also surpassed Indian ace Mohammad Shami. He becomes the bowler with the most wickets in the ICC tournament finals. And you mentioned now that the pitch provided, you know, modest pace and bounce, but initially then it flattened, and so it wasn't suitable for batting. What do you think is going to happen today?
Yeah, today is very interesting. I'd say like the morning session is going to be very important for South Africa. I think if we are able to win the morning session and make sure that we don't get any, we just keep the guys. We know they've got those 4 spearheads of theirs, Mitchell Starc and Cummings and Hazelwood. So those guys, they fight in pairs. So if we're able to just survive the morning session and have a partnership there, I think the guys can if you can get a lead of probably get to 170 to 200, I think that would be a good first innings for us.
Khanyiso, if we look at strategy, when they announced the starting lineups, a lot of people were wondering about, you know, especially that top order changes that were made, why decisions were made, especially for number 3. perhaps the application wasn't as effective. If you look at Steve Smith and Bo Webster, that was a better example of, leading their recovery and a better application of what can be done in the batting. What were your thoughts as they announced the lineup, and what do you think is going to happen then coming into today, and what the team is discussing as well?
Look, I mean, from an application perspective, it's difficult to blame South Africa for what could be termed as a strokeless defiance, because Australia bowled magnificently in the 22 overs before the end of play. I think Vian Mulde at 3 was always going to be a risk against the quality of Australia's bowling. And unfortunately, that slow car crash of an innings actually played out in the manner that a lot of people predicted. 6 of 43. I mean, at some point with Australia's bowling, you have to find a way to attack, but also trying to find a way to attack when they've found a shoebox outside of some, and they make it pretty impossible to play any attacking shots, does actually lead to them being dominant. Look, I mean, Australia, I think one of the things that was kind of forgotten in the maelstrom of South Africa's terrible batting was that Australia bowled magnificently, and so did South Africa up front. I mean, Bo Webster was very fortunate to have survived those 2 LBW appeals. I think had he been out on both of them, had he been given out, the game would have changed on its head, because it then would have forced Stephen Smith's approach to be very different with Australia's also long tail. And I mean, if you look at how South Africa bowled in that post-TC session where they took 5 for 22, that actually showed what was possible had both Bo Webster been dismissed. But because Bo Webster and Stephen Smith also batted at a time of the game where the ball had softened and become a bit easier to bat and capitalize on South Africa's not so strong support bowling. I mean, if you look at Lungi Ngidis and Vian Mulder's combined figures, their 19 overs went for 1. Especially in that post-lunch spell, that's where they actually taken toll off, because Vian Mulder bowled well up front, 6 overs, 1 maiden, 0 for 6. But in his following 5 overs, he went for 30, and that particular session mattered significantly for South Africa. So even Lungi Ngidis's selection was also a very contested one, and unfortunately, he didn't bowl well enough to prove why he should have played over Corbin Bosch or Dane Patterson.
I saw you nodding quite boldly there. Which part of all of what Khanyiso said were you in agreement with there, particularly?
Yeah, I was saying, for example, you look at the Australian bowling attack. Those guys hunt in packs. So you have those 3 to also 4 bowlers that will come in. They'll put you under pressure. I think with South Africa you have Kagiso, then you have Jansen. I think Lungi was going at 6 and over, which you would need for first change. So we need someone who's going to keep up the pressure and keep the pressure to the opposition.
In fact, I was going to ask you about that, and just that was also maybe perhaps one of the controversial decisions. And Bavuma mentioned that it actually wasn't an easy decision for them. Lungi over Patterson. What did you make of it?
Yeah, my thought was going Pato, Dane Patterson, or going Corbin Bosch. Corbin Bosch is the guy who will be able to bat for you and also bowl with the high 140s, high 140 k's an hour. But then Patterson also was playing a bit of county cricket. No, he didn't do exactly how he wanted to do, but last season he was one of the leading run scorers in the county championship, and that's his home ground where he plays at Lord's.
So
for his county.
Khanyiso, before I let you go, there's so much pressure on the South African cricket team, the Proteas. There's the C word, we're not going to mention it. We decided that we're not going to talk about it. But mentally, do you have some insight? Who have you been chatting to? How are they trying to change this mindset that not only this label that they have over them, but the mindset in the broader South African public about their ability to come back and win?
I think at times with the use of the word chokers, it gets lost in translation that other teams can actually play well enough to keep South Africa at the door. And I think that's what's transpired against Australia in the 2023 World Cup semi-final. That's what's happened in the 2024 final, T20 final against India, where India still had their best bowler, still had another 2 overs. They need to win a tournament. I mean, the only way to dispel that myth is to win a tournament, because they've lost they've lost playoffs in every conceivable way. That particular tag will stand. And I think South Africa, look at 43 for 4, they're still got a mountain to climb. But look, if they can get close to 200, they can actually turn this game into a third inning shootout. And that's something Australia have actually struggled with in the past. So I think South Africa's target this morning was to just ensure that they don't lose any wickets in that first session. And if they can use the first two sessions to get close to 200 and reduce the game to a third inning shootout, I think that they will turn the game in their favor. But that's going to be easier said than done.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for chatting to us. Aya, quick closing thought from you there.
Yeah, I think second innings, I think the morning session and second innings, because the bowlers and they haven't been bowling a lot. Both Australia and South Africa guys have been playing a lot of cricket. So I think mental toughness is gonna be important, and physical fitness. Gym fitness and bowling fit are two different fitness.
So true. Thanks so much for coming in and chatting to us. We've been chatting to cricket analyst Khanyiso Tshwaku as well as Ayavuya Myoli. We're talking about the ICC World Test Championship, which kicked off yesterday at Lord's, and they just shared their insights on that. That's it for your sports bulletin for this hour. We'll have plenty more coming up.